For this feature take, I'm delighted to introduce Lucy Caldwell, playwright and novelist, presenting her specially written piece on achieving a more reconciled Ireland.
I've been lucky enough to represent Ireland in the last couple of years at literary conferences across Europe, in North and South America, most recently in Japan, to name but some of the places where the privilege of my job has taken me. But the greatest privilege of all, which fills me to the brim with pride, is to see just how many people, many of whom have no genetic or familial connection to Ireland at all, have yet found, in Irish studies, and in Irish literature particularly, a spiritual home, a life's work and purpose, a lens through which to better hear and see and understand themselves. The Irish story has long been one of diaspora and has also been one of subjugation. As we move further into the 21st century, issues of displacement, refugee crises, asylum seeking and migration into a place whose sense of global identity is predicated on being a place from whence people left are only going to intensify. This is also a century which will likely see a referendum on the reunification of the island, and for both of these reasons, we must consciously work to build a society, a political system, a culture in which there is no sense of hierarchy, no tiered version of Irishness or perceived right to belong based on religion, on political affiliation, on North versus South, on recent immigration status, or on how many generations back you can claim. Because to me, the internal issues that Ireland faces with regard to reunification are essentially the same as those a country must face in terms of its global identity. The invidious sense of hierarchical Irishness is something that has plagued me all of my life. The notion that if you're from the north, you're not really Irish or not entitled to be fully Irish. I remember hearing it from family friends growing up, friends who would have held Irish passports, who would have identified as nationalist, even Republican in their politics. And a recent feature for the Irish Times by Emma Hanrahan and Hugh Dooley, entitled "You're Not Irish, You're Not One of Us," spoke of the frustration and dismay of young northern students encountering the same ongoing prejudice at universities in Dublin, Galway, Cork. There is also severe, often knee-jerk, anti-English prejudice in Ireland, both north and south, that elides and belies the deep and complex ties between the islands. To get personal for a moment, I was bullied for much of my childhood for having an English accent, and in adult life, the assumption frequently is that I moved away and deliberately changed or lost my accent. My dad is an Ulsterman, originally of Scottish ancestry, christened into the Church of Ireland, who grew up on a council estate in South Belfast. My mum was born in Bristol into an English Catholic family of humble means and Irish descent. My mum left school at 16, left home shortly afterwards, and moved to Belfast in 1975 when she met my dad. Belfast is her home, the place she's chosen, and she is upset when people insist, even all these years later, on aligning her with the place she happened to be born in, the place in which she was unhappy, the place she chose to leave. My sisters and I, very close to each other, and our mum, all grew up speaking like her. I wonder now how much this was, at some unconscious level, a way of protecting her, a sort of solidarity, because I think we were aware, in that keen and instant way that children can be, of how often people misread our mum, were suspicious of her, were cruel to her, an English accent in 1980s Belfast being freighted by so many assumptions. Sometimes it feels that my whole life, my voice has been questioned. On the receiving end, it feels like people questioning your right to tell certain stories and your right to speak or write at all. I address some of this in Being Various, the anthology of new Irish writing I edited for Faber in 2019, the most recent in the series begun by the legendary David Marcus, who used to insist on the importance of choosing plots and characters that aren't inked in green. Here's a short paragraph from my introduction. What makes a writer Irish is a question that has enervated and energised me for the whole of my writing life. I was born and grew up on the island of Ireland, yet never called myself Irish until I'd left. I sit at my desk in London, yet still find myself calling Belfast here. I hold both UK and Irish passports, and neither of them tells a full story. I feel apologetic and fraudulent to varying degrees, depending on who I'm with, where I'm going, whichever one I use. Who is more Irish? A writer born in Ireland who moves and stays away, or a writer born elsewhere who chooses to come, and there's that here again. A writer born in what is technically Ireland, in the island of sense, but who chooses to identify with the mainland. A writer born outside of Ireland to parents who keeps alive through songs, St. Patrick's Day, waking up in the wee hours to watch the rugby. A writer born in Ireland to parents from elsewhere who constantly has to answer that deathly question, no, but where are you really from? It remains a regret that I didn't manage to include a story by a writer of Irish traveller heritage, though Skean Press has since published beautiful editions of stories and essays by traveller writers Owen de Vardoon and Rosalie McDonough. But I'm glad of the ways that I did manage to break open, to expand the canon just a little. When Malata Uche Okori, who came to Ireland from Nigeria as an asylum seeker, heard her story would be published in the anthology, she emailed to say, "Would you believe I have 3 editions of the Faber New Irish Short Story series, and now I get a chance to be part of it. This is my Irish dream come true." And when Chinese-born Yenga, who married an Irishman and moved to Dublin in 2015, received her copy of Being Various in the post and saw that her story opens the anthology, she tweeted, "I feel like a real Irish Colleen." It's this spirit, I think, that is the most important thing we can try to centre and abide by and stay true to in a 21st century Ireland and for a more reconciled Ireland, insisting on multiplicity, on variousness, and resisting easy binaries. A referendum on the reunification of Ireland might ask the question, yes or no. The reality will not be so binary. For the reunification of Ireland to be a true act of reconciliation, it cannot and should not be a going back, a leapfrogging of 100 years to pick up ragged severed threads of continuity. Neither must it be the subsuming of Northern Ireland into what already exists. An Ireland unified must be a new 21st century country, and Irishness on a reconciled island must be generous, capacious, open, outward-facing, and always, always non-hierarchical. I think it bears repeating, to me, these internal and external issues Ireland faces this century are essentially the same. We are the sum of the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and how we came to be. That Ireland has changed so much over the last decades is largely due to the power of story. The Waking Feminists movement, which grew out of the 1916 centenary commemorations, asking where our women's voices were on the national stages and in the national tapestry. The work by historians such as Catherine Corliss and Colm O'Gorman, bringing hidden and buried stories into the public domain and keeping them there. The deeply personal stories shared by so many that were so crucial to the equal marriage and the bodily autonomy referendums that rewrote the Irish Constitution. So what should we give? We should give space and time and credence and consideration to all versions of the Irish story, maybe even and especially when they don't accord with our own or with the most told versions of Irishness, maybe especially when they're ambivalent or difficult or new, when they are plots inked in orange or pink or gold. And what could we gain? Well, people the world over feel an affinity with the best of what it means to be Irish. With a truly generous, multiplicitous, various, simultaneous, contradictory, open and outward vision of Irishness, we gain the world.